Across the Pacific in the United States, a furor is developing.
You, as an American teenager, are offended by statements from a group of foreign singers which strike at the very basis of our existence as God-fearing, patriotic citizens. Then we urge you to take your records, pictures, and souvenirs to the pickup point about to be named. And on the night of its appearance in Memphis,
The bond between you and me, it will be known forever. You showed me how to be free, stronger than me. You'll be known forever. I know without me or three, I hope to stay around for some time. But there's something pressuring me. I don't know how things will play out this time. The things you read in papers, where truth is merely capers with misleading headlines. A man as big as Jesus would only want to lead us to the light like a Lord. And there's something going on here, John. There's something going on here, John. There's something going on here, John. There's something going on here, John.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to The Shadow of a Bassman. I'm Mary Ann Howard with Ann Welsh, and we have guests Susan Charlton and Amelia Chapman tonight talking about The Shadow of a Bassman, Paul McCartney. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Being part of this, and also for being part of our Facebook whatever.
Facebook group page.
Facebook group. So,
We do have a Facebook group for anybody who wants to join us into our crazy world of it's The Shadow of a Bassman on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So, yeah, Susan, why don't you start us off as to, she's up in my upper right, as to how you came to the realization that Paul McCartney is not Paul McCartney and he's been deceased and replaced.
Oh, well, it was about 8 years ago, 2015, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just reading on Google the top 50 conspiracy theories, and I was really shocked to see Paul McCartney is dead because I hadn't come across it at that point. And I was like, what? So I just dived straight in, and I didn't do anything else for about 4 days straight. It took me about 4 days before I was really sure, or before I could tell who was Paul and who was the replacement. And I just remember watching a video, and you know, the early videos where they all say that Paul died in a car accident after a recording session. And when I heard them say that, I just had this really strong gut reaction that wasn't true, like really strong. It really hit me. And I just remember knowing, oh my God, they killed him. I just knew. So, and it was a really traumatic time for me. So, just because of that, nothing else. Well, I suppose there was other things going on, but I was so affected by that realization that I was fully grieving for about 3 months. Like, I would wake up in the middle of the night crying, and it was actually it was John Holback who helped get me through that time, because he would often be online, and while he was online, I would say, "Oh God, I can't believe it," and so he shared a lot of the stuff that he knew, but gee, it was huge. You know, I don't know how everybody else felt, but it was like,
Yeah, I agree. It was the same for me. I had like video after video when Lori messaged me or she called me and then she told me and then she had me watch a video and then she had me watch another video and I was just devastated. So yeah, as Ann was. And Amelia, how did you come to this world?
Well, I know that when I was younger, listening to the music, my aunt, my mom's younger sister, was a Beatles fan, and she still is to this day. And she was like, "Look at that!" And I said, "What's the matter?" And she was just listening to the music. She goes, "This is very different." And I said, "What do you mean?" And in Spanish is "tía," and she says, "There's something different about this music." And I'm like, "What?" She said, "Played me two different ones." She goes, "This is not the same anymore." And she kept listening, and that's when she realized that it was different. And she goes, "Something's different with this." And then she was noticing the albums were a lot different with the pictures as well. And she would always tell me, she says, "This is something going on, something's going on." And of course, back then you couldn't really do as research as you can now.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who were around in those days, I was 8 when Sergeant Pepper's came out. Oh no, I was probably 9.
Yeah,
and
you
I'd
and I are
always
about
be-
the same age. We both about hit it at about the same time.
Yeah, I was a real Beatles fan, and Paul was my favorite. And when Sergeant Pepper's came out, it was, I think so many women had this. It was just like, it was a gut kind of reaction to
Yes.
What happened?
It's just like, I don't think I like them anymore. It was just this not very nice feeling about it. But of course, we didn't know what it was because nothing like that happened in those days, or not that we were aware of. So, and the television screens were like that big, so you couldn't really do your
They weren't as big as mine back.
No.
Yes, and I remember we were the channel changers too.
Well, and you may have, were you in Australia then or were you in England?
No, I was in England then.
So you would have had more access to the visuals than we did. Me as that age, we only had the Ed Sullivan shows. We didn't really, and at that age, it's not like I could go out and buy Teen Beat, Tiger Beat or whatever the other magazines were at the time. So you had so much more video, like the Shakespeare thing and all that stuff. We didn't get any of that.
But because I was so young, and all the really good stuff had already come out by then. I do remember watching A Hard Day's Night when it was released, but more than the Beatles was the Monkees. So the Monkees were like really popular in England, and I used to watch their show every week.
Me too.
Yeah.
Sort of like you went off the one and went to the other, but
well, that's interesting, isn't it? So that
because they came on, the Monkees started in '66, right when Paul died. So it's sort of like Davy Jones replaced him in that, in that way.
That's a really big point for me. That the Monkees they arrived as the Beatles were compromised, and I always wondered whether that was a deliberate sabotage. Like, like get rid of the Beatles.
It was set up that way. Yeah, possibly. I mean, they were there in the filming of A Day in the Life.
Oh, were they? Oh, they were. Yes.
Yeah.
Were they all there?
Mike was,
and Mickey was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mickey was there. Yeah, he met.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'd have to watch the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about.
There's quite a few connections, isn't there, with clues in the Monkees shows, and very strange that Davy Jones looked so much like Paul in some ways, and like really in some ways more than Billy. He's got that look more than Billy, I think, and also I found it interesting because he's so short. Like they must have chosen him because of his look. He was,
because he's only 5'3".
5'3". Yeah.
And David Jones was there in '64 on the Ed Sullivan Show with the Beatles when the first show on the 9th of February.
Davy Jones.
Davy Jones was on that show with the Beatles. Yeah. doing Oliver. He's doing.
Yeah, he did Oliver. That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. He was the Artful Dodger, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was there, and he said that he was so overcome by the music and the hysteria, and he's like, I want a piece of that. And 2 years later he ends up being a monkey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he liked the fame and the fortune, basically. To me, I think that's what it was a lot about. I don't think he wanted the girl thing. I think it was more of the fortune too, as well. And he saw that and he's like, oh, I want that. And of course he saw the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, he'd been in the industry since he was like 9. He came over from Manchester to New York when he was, young, and been around stage. So he had that stage presence as a young chap,
Yeah, luckily he made it, because a lot of actors these days, when they're young, they don't make it as adult actors like they have been back then. That's the sad part.
Yeah. He actually had I don't want to say a ranch, but he actually he lived like 50 miles up north from me, and played in some of the bars up there, but I didn't know about it until after he did. It's let's see, that's 2012. This time 2012. I remember because I had just started working at my previous job that happened. Him and David Cassidy both passing really quick, close together.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
I had a crush on David Cassidy.
Well,
yeah. Oh yeah.
David.
Uh-huh.
And his brother too.
Yeah. And Sean's out there doing tours. And shout out to him because he finally he's posting that he's breaking that taboo of being on stage and singing again. So that's nice. He was just in Hawaii, I think, last week.
Oh wow, that'd be beautiful to go see that.
Look, you can look for his schedule. He hops around.
Oh, good. Hope he comes to Florida.
I'm sure. Yeah. So pick up anybody. I don't care
well, I have
or where we go.
Oh, right. Well, the question, when you both were starting your books, and I know you were introduced by Shirley. What got you started in the titles, basically, first of all?
In the titles?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
or the first book.
One of our favorite songs is Yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about, a shadow hanging over me.
Mm-hmm.
So we took the idea of shadow, and it's very popular, like shadow government.
Yes.
So you can kind of incorporate that and the corruption that goes on in government. So the idea really came from the song Yesterday, and what it must have felt like for the other 3 to have this shadow hanging over them with Paul's death, and how they had to carry on without him, and how difficult that would have been. So then we take, so shadow actually means several different things in the book series. The shadow is Paul. We kind of like
have him dancing.
His perspective. It's what he's seeing, So he's the shadow. You have like the shadow government is also, the shadow is just a feeling of despair, dread, grieving, for your mate that you just lost. So it means several different things in the book. So that's where the idea of shadow came from, and everything is going to be shadow of something.
Right.
Yeah. The shadow word continues in each book title.
And with the
shadow is Paul.
Book, and with the upcoming book, the nonfiction, shadow box is a shadow box is you put your mementos in there, you remember things. So the shadow box is also like your secrets that you keep. So this is the shadow box is the secrets that he kept and what he was involved in behind the scenes of Beatlemania. And we also go into what Paul was really like, and we use original sources from the 60s, from magazine articles and newspapers, and we try to pull as much as possible from original sources from that time that we can gather. So it's process growing.
Yeah, a lot of things is before, it's before the 66 act, death, because then it's the true word.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where Shadow came from. Is just the song Yesterday.
It's a great title, and
it is.
It's a great word as well, isn't it? Like, I always think of Peter Pan. The word shadow is associated with Peter Pan, and remember how he lost his shadow and Wendy had to stitch it back on for him.
Yeah, and we have it in that one scene where Paul's doing something with the music and the shadow is dancing on the wall. So it's sort of it does it. He comes across as the shadow, because he's a shadow of himself as well in his spirit world. In the spirit world,
and he was actually different from the other three, wasn't he? Like I'm interested that a lot of the photos that we see, he's sort of standing separately. You often see him standing sort of a little bit separate from the other three, and or when A Hard Day's Night started, he wasn't in the first few
5 minutes
shots. Yeah.
He had his grandpa to take care of in that first few minutes.
It's interesting though. It's like Paul's not there. Why isn't he there? I find that interesting.
Yeah, because I feel like after his death, really they didn't really want to include him, but of course they had no choice. They had in the matter, and I just wonder how the other Beatles, were. I know that they were knighted and they had no choice in the matter. And years later, now Ringo, of course, does his own thing, and of course the fake Paul. Have you, the way he just let himself go like that? I just, if you're going to represent someone, I think you should do it proudly. And have you seen the way he's let himself go?
No.
It's awful. It's just awful. But going back to
he's not a young man.
No. But it's just bad. But going back to the fake Paul, how she was saying he separated himself, and you could really, really tell from like the pictures of his mouth exactly. You could tell the differences. Yeah.
And if anybody who's watching who hasn't seen the differences, episode number 7, we have the photo comparisons. It's a long video, but there's a lot of pictures, and there's 300 picture comparisons, 300 slides. That's 600 pictures.
Yeah, it really is obvious, isn't it? And like I said before, it took me about 4 days before I could tell the difference in every shot. I think we were fortunate back in those days, because now that they've spliced so many of the pictures, it makes it a bit harder to see, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially
and we all do believe that. We all do believe that, right? That they have photoshopped and overlaid pictures.
Yeah.
So.
Especially what they can do nowadays. Yes. Yeah,
I'm not a very good when it comes to looking and seeing the Photoshop pixelations and stuff, that some people can do that and have done it. But it's another one of those things like, well, why would they have done that if there wasn't a reason to? Why would you Photoshop this picture? Why is there's that one picture of and I have it in that video, that is Paul in an interview, and then there's another picture years later now, supposedly supposed to be the same picture, but it's not. It's a Billy overlay, and things are, it's a different picture. They're totally, you know what I mean? It's supposed to be him. It's just
there's another thing that I'm that really irks me every time I see it, is the remastering of the music.
Yeah.
Like, why are they remastering the music, and how are they remastering? And like, are they taking Paul's tracks out or his voices out? What
The
what are they doing to the
remastering
music?
is probably was started because of everything was recorded in mono and to put it
Yeah.
over into stereo.
Yeah.
But when they're doing that, you're right. Then are they manipulating the voices at the same time? You know, they manipulated on the tracks and as the engineering did when they were actually recording. So can you imagine with the technology they have today, remastering, and they can pull out each little thing? So can we pull Paul out and put Billy in?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sure they could. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you can see that in Free as a Bird, like how they were able to take that,
Yeah, they took John's cassette.
you know, very
Mhm.
very sketchy cassette, wasn't it? And turn it into
Yeah, he recorded that at
song
home. I don't know what it was
sounded
recorded
like
on, if it was reel to reel or what kind of tape it was. But yeah.
Oh yeah, they can do a lot these days. It's the AI technology is what it's called. They could do it with a face. They could do it with a voice. They did it with Val Kilmer in one of his movies, where they did his voiceover. It was him moving his mouth, but it was his voice that they put in it as well. And they could do so much these days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
remastering,
Go ahead.
the remastering actually started in November of '66.
Mhm.
And they started to destroy the master tapes of the Beatles. And, you know, who destroys master tapes?
of the
Yeah.
Beatles.
Of the
Mhm.
Beatles.
Them of all bands, you know?
Yeah, that's one of those facts that's written in the book. You know,
Mhm.
when the sound engineer meets John on the rooftop,
Mhm.
hands him a copy of the tapes before they were the original tapes before they were remastered. We don't know that
Yeah.
they did that, but you know,
Yeah.
it's our point of saying that the tapes were being destroyed.
Mhm.
Why?
Yeah, it's the systematic replacement of Paul, or the systematic deleting of his presence
Yeah,
in
Right.
anything. You know,
removing
Yeah.
him.
the way that Billy lies in his stories, everything is
Mhm.
rewriting the history, and it makes me cringe every time I hear him speak about when he was there, when he wasn't there, and we know he wasn't there. And
Well,
Yeah.
it's his twisted way of speaking that is, which people think is him just being snarky, but
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the sound engineer, because that's actually a clue. So we dropped a lot of clues in there that seems to be getting missed, which is okay. That's why I'm glad it's come up.
well,
and
yeah,
talk about this. Because the sound engineer we picked his name purposely. His name is Bobby Fuller.
Mhm.
Well, he was an actual musician in 1966, and he died in July of 1966. And if you look at his death, it's very mysterious.
Yes.
oh, have I lost you? Or
Oh.
Oh,
there you are.
there you are.
is it Jeff Emmerich?
Mhm.
Yes. Sorry, I thought I'd lost you guys. You lost me. Is that Jeff Emmerich, the sound engineer?
Jeff
Yeah.
Emmerich, yeah.
Yeah.
But we like Ann's saying, the name was Bobby Fuller in the book.
Uh-huh.
Go
Mhm.
ahead.
And so that's like dropping a clue to readers to take a look at Bobby Fuller's death, because it's very mysterious. And in the middle of that is Alan Klein, the Beatles' future manager, was part of Bobby Fuller's record label. So he's kind of like in this group. But his death is very mysterious. Do you know anything about Bobby Fuller's death? Anybody?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, he was an up and coming rising star, and he was looked upon as the next Elvis Presley. They wanted him. He's kind of being prepped for that. And one of his biggest songs was "I Fought the Law," which I love.
yeah.
That.
Oh yes.
And actually, the bass line is based on "I Saw Her Standing There," which I thought was kind of cool. Bobby Fuller had some kind of tiff with his record label or whatever, and he was going to leave his record label. Well, they didn't want him to because he was going to be a big star. And so one night, it's like 2:00 in the morning. He gets a phone call. He leaves the house. He's at his mother's house. He leaves the house in his mother's car. He goes missing for about 15 hours. And his mother is, you know, frantic trying to find his, doesn't know where her son is. And then at 5:00 in the morning, she goes, or 5:00 in the afternoon, she goes out into her driveway, sees that the car that he borrowed had returned, but he was dead inside.
Oh.
Wow.
And he had been dead for about 12 hours. So there's no way he could have died somewhere else and drove himself to his mother's house. He's already passed away. So he was found with a broken finger. He had inhaled gasoline. And he was beat up. But he said that he died from suicide.
Yeah, everybody died from suicide. I mean, we made that comment in the nonfiction book that there were a lot of deaths surrounding the Beatles, but they were not murders. They were suicides and overdoses.
Yeah.
So they can.
Yeah, like Alan Caldwell and his mum.
Yeah.
Always.
Somebody just mentioned, I don't remember, somebody just mentioned them the other day in one of our chats, and it was like, tell me that somebody really thinks that they committed suicide together on separate floors. No. And Paul dated Rory's sister.
Yeah.
So they had spent a lot of time with Paul. That's not,
Yeah.
Wow.
So what happened to Irene? Didn't she go to Canada or something?
To who? Your volume's low, Susan.
Irene Caldwell?
I don't know what happened to her. Do you know, Ian? Rory's sister? Iris.
Iris?
Okay.
Iris.
Iris.
The last I knew, she was still in Liverpool. The last I saw her in a documentary, I think, and she was talking about dating him and it was how wonderful it was. You could tell she still wants him. Well, who doesn't?
Right? Doesn't be a fly on there.
Canada.
Jane's in Canada.
Who was that?
Jane Asher's in Canada.
Someone else as well?
Yeah, Dot. Isn't Dot?
Oh, yeah, I think Dot might be there too as well.
Yeah, and she met the replacement, didn't she?
Yeah, probably.
I
invited her to a
I
concert.
found a Facebook profile of Iris Caldwell. I found a Facebook profile of Iris Caldwell living in the south of England a few years back.
Okay.
And I did try and contact her, but she didn't respond. But I'm sure it was her because there was a Beatles connection in the thing. But you might want to have a look at that. Look her up on Facebook, see what comes up.
I'm going to be looking people up and knocking on their doors.
As the other book, the one that came about as well, and I know you guys are working on a third book as well. Have you guys, since the third book, wanted to, continue on, like make it like a box set, make a 5th or 6th book as well?
Yeah, it's a saga. It's not a series anymore, which I usually think of as a 3. It's more like a saga.
Oh, that's good, because I gotta continue reading. I'm hooked.
It's years plus now of information, and you can't. I mean, people don't realize. These aren't skinny books. I don't have one really quick to grab because I have my laptop sitting on a bunch of them. But they're over 400 pages. The nonfiction book. I will be surprised if it's not 600 pages or more because of even just adding the resources. The resources alone are, going to be a lot.
Yeah, each chapter has between 40 and 60.
No, they have like 60.
70.
I've been adding a lot of resources and pictures and different
Mhm.
things in as I'm editing. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's gonna
Yeah.
be big.
Mhm. I like that though, because that way if you go back and forth, if you don't look at
Yeah.
this, you can look at this. I was like, oh, okay, that's great, and that's what I love too, because I can go back and forth. But you're like, if you're there, that's what I love about the books. It's like, I'm actually there, seeing it through his eyes. Is what I fell in love with. Is my I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually here with him. Or when I don't want to give too much away for the first one, but
No, you can
when
give it.
when I was
To know.
when he was at the church looking for the money, or the nun was helping him out, I was actually there. I was like, yes, let's go find that money. Let's go in there. And I was like helping him walk through the church. And I was like, okay, they were describing everything. I was like, I could actually see the church. I could actually see the portraits and the sculptures that you guys were talking about. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually here. And I just love that. The descriptions were awesome.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. There was something else we wanted to focus on, is like, for any Beatle fan, they're going to know that what's fiction and what's nonfiction. What's nonfiction. It's not true. What's fiction? What's true? Not true.
We have a lot of that from people that will sit there and say, well, it's fiction. This isn't true. And it's fiction and none of this happened. And these characters aren't. They have to look beyond what is literally there and look for the facts, because there's 600 facts in the first book.
Right, exactly.
There's 400 pages and 600 facts. So figure it out, at least, So yeah, people need to look at those sources and think of the scenario and like figure it out. We're giving them a mystery to figure out on their own, if they want to.
Yes. And that's what we do on our show, me and Angelo, on our, if I may say, on What's the Buzz podcast. Angelo and I do our research as well before we go on the air, and he has taught me so much. I just want to say thank you to Angelo DeCipio, Mad Dog, as he wants to be called. We do our research so much, just as you ladies do, before you actually put it on paper, or we go on the air, and we're not going to put something on the air, and just like you guys are not going to put something on paper before you do all your research.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to understand, is that you're going to do hours and hours of research before you start typing. And you're also going to add your research on there.
Yeah.
And that's why the books are.
Hours and hours is a very big understatement.
Exactly. Hours and weeks and months, basically.
Months and years. Years upon years.
But we get these beautiful books to read, though, at the end.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
We also use symbolism in the book too. So like the sunrise and the sunset. The sunrise is his birth, the sunset was his death, and then we use certain colors, and each color means something different.
White candles.
White candles, because white is something pure, pure love. You light a candle in remembrance of somebody, so we try to like quite a bit. The white rose is pure love, and I think that's what he had really.
Oh yes.
Everybody. I mean, he was just a light. I think this is like love, for this.
Yes, that's what I always try to do as well. I always. I always try to. I always try to light a candle for someone that's passed recently, or remembrance of someone, or their birthday. That's how I am.
Yeah, and they appreciate those candles. That's prayers for the dead. That's appreciated from them, for the other side. It helps with their ascensions.
Oh, absolutely. And on you're working on the third book, am I understanding right now?
The third book is written. It's being, we're in the editing process of that one.
Wow.
Anne's been going on into the fourth book while I'm back in editing in these other two, but yeah.
Oh, wow, I'm excited.
Like, Anne, take a rest. She keeps going. You're still out.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if she's froze or if she's just, gone out, but that's all right. Yeah, is there any questions that you guys have on sections of the book?
You had mentioned about putting some pictures in. They're going to be in the third book, correct?
The pictures, when I was saying that, I'm working in the nonfiction book. Sometimes we do put pictures in the other books, a couple here and there. But the nonfiction book there's pictures in it. I'm sourcing those, so nobody gets upset.
Right.
Everything's sourced. Quotes are sourced. The pictures are sourced. It's a lot.
Oh yes, it's a lot to do, and people don't understand that when you write a book, there is a lot to write just a book. It's just not just here you go, write it next chapter.
You just finished Shadow Dancing, right? So Shadow Dancing was the second book, and that gets into John's death. And war on Paul and the Beatles and what was going on in the 80s. And in the nonfiction book, then that carries over. So we are getting into John's death in that book, as well as George's attack. But we have documents in both books, the death certificates and whatnot. We got to get more people reading the first and the second book, and hopefully the nonfiction will bring people, will have a better understanding of why people look at this as a thing. And a real thing, as opposed to it's just another one of those conspiracies. Conspiracies are all derived from truths.
Yes, and we can get them on Amazon.com.
Yes, shadowofabaseman.com links over to the books and to the YouTube channel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the third book gets more into, Paul's predicament when you leave the second book. But it carries on. We're getting into other things as was going on in the industry and other people that had died, other things. So we're eventually getting up into George's attack and then carrying on through till whatever. But yeah, the first book is primarily Paul's accident, it wasn't his accident, but his death, and through his eyes.
Well, I know that the second one, of course, starts off with from the first book with Paul's son.
Yeah,
and he wants to carry the legacy.
How confusing is that? But we had to carry the book through. We had to have a character carry on, and kind of care enough to be looking for what happened and have that investigative mind of trying to figure it out. And the only way to do that was through a child. The child's going to want to know.
And that would be me.
Well, and real Paul has children out there that are not acknowledged, that would like to be acknowledged, but they can't. They can't be. And that was sort of a nod to them as well by having Paul Jr., Paul Lennon, as we have him named, as his voice.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, because if it was me, I'd be putting my investigate hat on and say, okay, what happened to my dad or what happened to my mom at that point, and wanted to know every little bitty detail and saying this is not.
Well, they want to know why. Why was this?
Exactly. And this is part of my legacy. Why isn't my legacy, or what's happening to my dad's legacy? Why is this man faking this? Right. Absolutely. That's most definitely.
Still no luck there, sweetie?
My internet is out.
Oh. Well,
no.
You are now the voice.
I am now the shadow.
Anne is the shadow on camera.
She's our shadow.
Well, we carried on. I told them a little bit about the session I had 2 weeks ago and how Paul came through right away without the lady knowing anything about me or the Paul connections, and the fact that when he was telling us about his death, the Anne Heche aspect, because I still think that was, and he described his death to me in that session the same way that we wrote it in the book. which is what we've been getting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what our research showed before. Also,
Yeah.
we used maps from 1966 to kind of figure out possible places where he could have had his accident and murder. So yeah, that's all good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's that part in the book is based on our research and what we have found, but it can change as more evidence comes to light. It's just a possible scenario.
It's a possible scenario. But I just found it interesting that possible scenario was what was conveyed. And then the aspect of knowing that he was taken out of the car and killed after the fact, that he didn't die in the car accident. He confirmed that by using the Anne Heche reference. And yeah.
Yeah.
Such a horrific death.
What, Susan?
It's such a horrific death.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just like taken out like that, that's like, it's like your contract's up right then.
Yeah, it was purposeful.
Well, it was a thought out plan, I believe. It was well planned how to do it, in a remote area versus, on the streets of somewhere where you have a lot of people around or any eyewitnesses. You don't want to have any. You don't want anybody to see, especially who it was. So it was done in a remote area. It's most logical.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that's the sad part about it too. When you're a celebrity and then you have to do certain things, or you say, okay, well, this is going to happen at a certain time, and of course, your time, and like you were saying, like Marianne was saying, they thought he had died, and then of course they took him out, and what else could they do but replace him? And
well,
it was just,
they knew that they were going to replace him before they had him taken out. That's the horrific aspect of it.
Yeah, because he knew too many things.
Yeah, it's not like he died and then they said, okay, now we got to replace him.
Yeah,
I don't think that anyway.
Yeah, and how long of time did they already know that they were going to replace him? Like a year or 6 months? Did they ever figure that out?
I believe that it was at least 2 years in the planning, probably starting in late '63, knowing that he could be a potential problem. He was very adamant to make sure that before they came to the United States, they had a #1 hit. Also, and I think that put a little monkey wrench into
their plans.
The powers that be.
Right.
He delayed their timeline.
Yeah, and I think it was the right choice. I think that was the right thing to do. Yeah, to have a hit before you come over here, because we don't know who you are. Right. Back then, we didn't have computers and internet and all that kind of freedom of information there. So it was, new music to the Americans. So yeah, I think that was a right choice on his part, because they didn't want to come over here and not be known and flop. They were expecting to come over here and kind of work their way up, like they did in England, to become popular, and they were willing to really work hard and work their way up to get known. But they had instant success when they came here.
Right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that is, when they went on the Ed Sullivan Show, that was a big break for them. And then, Beatlemania took off in the United States then. And everybody just fell in love with them. You got 70 million people watching them.
Well, and
you need it, right?
You look at the fact that they had bussed in all those people for when they arrived before people even saw him on Ed Sullivan. And then you have them on how many weeks in a row on Ed Sullivan? I don't even remember. But they
3
were
weeks in a row.
how three? 3?
3.
Yeah. So that just punked it. And why would they, normally a band isn't going to get 3 weeks in a row on Ed Sullivan. You get a 1-song shot and here you go. They played 4 songs the first night and came back then the next week and then the next week. Yeah. Which was good. That was good, but that was like a planned thing. Ed Sullivan doesn't say, okay, well, we're going to have you back next week because you're so good tonight. It was already planned.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think also too with them coming on, and then of course Elvis being in the army and everything like that, we needed something here something different too, and I loved that. And my aunt loved, like I was saying earlier, my aunt loved their music, and she, my mom always, had certain kind of music, and I was like, let's go to my aunt's house. I want to see what she's doing. So that's how I got introduced to different kind of music, and I loved it. She'd always be dancing around, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm running in the house saying, what is she listening to now? So that's how I got introduced to a lot of different music, and I loved it.
Yeah.
But, later on, too, she could tell a big difference until she started listening to different types. But she still listened to the Beatles, but to her, it wasn't the same. And it never was.
Well, the psychedelic movement and the way their music changed, people either were going to like it or they weren't.
Yeah.
And at that age for us, it was a hard transition because we weren't like in that teenager, But they brought on a whole, revolution for everything else.
Oh, yes.
But that was part of it.
Oh, yeah. And then I love the idea that the albums, the actual vinyl albums are coming back, because I miss the crisp, sound of the albums, and I love that they're coming back now.
Yeah. Well, if people haven't realized they're coming back, but you can still go out and find them.
Oh, yes. And
Believe
people.
me, I know my wallet's felt the pain.
Yeah, I love the idea, because the CDs, you can't get it's not the same sound. Even though it's bad, or no, it's not. Because you can actually get the actual Paul McCartney in these albums. But you can actually get, like you were saying, in these other stores. And the CDs is probably, the fake one. And I don't want that. I want the real one.
There's some of these older albums are remastered and they're repressed. And they're not under the original label, so they're still not the originals.
Unless you can find them, get lucky to find them.
Find them, and that's going to be that's very hard and very pricey.
Yes.
So I don't know, Susan, are you able to find stuff over in Australia? Can you hear me? Susan. No. She's making her coffee. She's making coffee.
I get lucky sometimes. We have a flea market sometimes that we have vendors, and we'll get lucky to find albums sometimes there. And these people will come in from.
That's where you're going to find originals sometimes. Is people don't know what they don't know the relevance of what they have. It's an old record to them, but that old record could be.
Right. Yeah, because this elderly lady, she had some stuff.
What, honey?
Oh, I was just going to say, that I've just recently started a record collection, and I do have all the ones that I'm buying are originals.
Yeah. That's the best way to, go about it, is to try and get the originals. So if anybody's looking for originals for the Beatles, it's Parlophone or Capitol. By the time they're Apple, the Apple is already.
Yeah, because I always look at the back of the album, especially if I look at it, I'll turn around. And we recently had a flea market here. This lady, I guess she was cleaning out her husband's stuff, and she really didn't know what she was doing. So I looked at it, and I was like, ooh, like, look at these albums, they're original and they're in the packet because they still had the plastic on them. She was almost like 50 cents, $1. I'm like, she doesn't even know what she has. I'm just getting them. Yeah, I did. I was like, I'm getting them. And I got like a stack like this of country ones. And I was like, hurry up, let's go.
Yeah.
Before she doesn't know what she has. So
Yeah.
Mm. That's how you got to look for them. They were
They
still in
don't
the little
care, they want to
plastic.
get rid of them. They don't care because it's, yeah. But,
Yeah. So we really didn't have time, but I was like, let's get as much as we can.
yeah. I know, I'm ready. As soon as it gets nice out, I'm going to be out hitting some of the auction balls.
Yeah.
Best place to go to find stuff. If we ever find the time, right, Ann?
Oh, yeah. I gotta get my internet back.
Well, you don't need your internet to keep writing, and that's what you keep doing, so.
Yeah, well, it's fun. It's fun creating the stories and putting the research and embedding the research along the way. Because with shadow dancing, we continue, with raising Paul's son, Paul.
Yeah.
And all the trouble he gets into just trying to find out what really happened along the way.
He is just a mischievous little scamp, isn't he? Just like his father.
I'd probably be getting in trouble as much as I would probably look. They said, don't look under that rock or don't open that door. I'll be looking under that rock and opening that door.
Yeah.
That would be me.
Yeah.
But how long does it take you to write a chapter or two?
It depends.
Usually about 2 weeks for a chapter, and then you go back and you
add.
Well, about 2 weeks for a chapter because there's research that goes into it. I'll say, okay, Marian, we got to research this, and she'll come up with stuff, and I'll come up with some different stuff, and then that all goes into that, that story, that chapter.
Merges together, and then we add to. I mean, one like book 3's written, book nonfiction's written, but we will be going back in, rereading, re-adding, re-editing for a while until it's the way we're happy. I guess that's sort of like when they're composing music and they keep adding to it and adding it. We'll be adding tracks, so to speak.
Yeah, until it's right.
Until it's right.
What did we just do a rewrite on? Oh, George's death.
George's death.
For the nonfiction.
Yeah,
book.
I have a book coming in. I have a book coming in the mail to look at some stuff that was Anne said, get this book. It's got Danny's statement in it of George's act, what his impression of what happened to George. So it'll be added in. So that's the kind of stuff we do. We're having to go back and find sources, especially with the nonfiction. Wanting to have accountings, first-hand accountings.
Yeah.
What was your question again? Like, what's the story behind?
The storyline in the factual book. What
do you want to tell her, Anne? The nonfiction, like how it progresses?
Shadowbox?
Yeah, Shadowbox.
Well, when I started this book back in 2016, my vision was like a court case. Yeah. Right? So it's an investigation, and I love a good mystery, and I love cop shows, and and all that. So my vision was, just to defend Paul. And so what do investigators do first? Well, they had to find out who their victim was. So that's the first chapter where you describe who Paul was, so that you have his personality, you know him, and you can tell the difference between the two personalities of two different men, because his personality does change in 67. And
that's an understatement.
Well, you have people like Ruth, who said that, in 1967, Paul changed a lot. So, and
you have George Harrison. George Harrison making that statement. I wish I could find it again, if anybody finds it, how there was this traumatic occurrence that happened in 66, and he never says what the traumatic occurrence was. And as according to the Beatle history, there is no traumatic occurrence.
He did say something about that on the Ray Martin show in Australia. So
yeah, was that where it was?
Yeah.
Well, if you find it, let me send it to me.
Yeah.
We'll plug it in.
Ray Martin asked him, I forget what George said. But he was making a comment about how traumatic it is for him to be in a live interview. And he said, yeah, something like this is, that's what I mean. It's like being live on camera, being asked these questions. And then he alluded to the difficulties that they had in 1966.
Yeah, but this was even more so than that. He was basically talking about something that was traumatizing.
Was that anthology?
I don't know. It was a video I saw, and I didn't source it at the time, and now it's snagging at me that I got to look for it because that would fit into that era, thing. Anyway, go ahead, honey. Carry on. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, this is all good. It's all right. So, and then, you hear stories how after 66, Paul became, controlling of the band and taking over the band, and it didn't set well with the other three. Well, the things that we were reading, prior to 67, when Paul was there, Paul was the one that smoothed all the arguments over. He was the peacemaker. He was the diplomat. He was the PR person. John Lennon even said Paul was the best public relation person the Beatles could have had because he knew how to work with the press, work with people in a diplomatic way, and get things done. And there's a quote I have from George in a magazine from 1964, and he credits Paul as the one that is, doesn't make waves. You can't argue. He said you can't argue with Paul because he's so intelligent that you just don't want to argue with him because he knows how to handle situations. And he's the one that keeps them together. And
he keeps them on track.
And all of them were tight like brothers. And even Ringo said, they're my brothers. So, and John, in the same magazine, even said that, talking about Paul is bearing my soul. So that means he's really super close to Paul. He really appreciates him and loves him like a brother. So, so given those facts, and then you see, their comments changing about Paul after 66, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit to what they were saying prior. So with a book, so that's the first chapter. We get to know, who Paul was. So then we have to look at motivation. Why would somebody want to take him out? And that's when we discover that what he was doing behind Beatlemania that really were
against the
a
grain.
threat to them. Really, he was involved in the nuclear disarmament. He was pro-civil rights, and that created problems in the southern states. When they came out and said that they wouldn't play to a segregated audience, and then they went to some of our southern states, they were denied security. Hotels canceled their reservations. They lost police protection for these just because they were pro-civil rights. I mean, that's ridiculous. But yeah, those were some of the things that they, for the times.
Yeah.
They were anti-war. That was a huge problem. also. And Paul was against drugs also. You know, I was reading a story that on the set of Help, you know, he was offered heroin. And Paul's like, no, there's no way did he want to do that. He didn't want anything, any drug, anything, nothing that was going to interfere with his creativity. And he did not like the drug agenda that was going on.
I think drug agenda
LSD.
Part of it, wasn't
Wait.
it? Sorry, Anne.
You got it. Your volume's low, Susan.
All right,
Okay.
okay.
ahead.
I think that drug agenda was a huge part of why he was replaced, why he was taken out, because they wanted to get everybody on the gear. And yeah, that first interview that Billy did, the
Yeah.
really terrible one.
The rambling man.
Yeah, yeah. Paul wouldn't have done anything like that.
No.
Right. Right. And there's a quote also from Brian Epstein that said Paul had the most difficulty adjusting to fame because he didn't want to change the Beatles' music to more adult music, is how he put it. And if you look, this is a quote from 65, 66 time. And what was the adult music changing to? Psychedelic.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want to go in that direction. I don't think he would have done Sgt. Pepper and the Magical Mystery Tour at all.
Well, it would have
Because
been
those
totally
were the
different. I
same-
mean,
same
it
time.
would have been totally different as Paul and John interacting as opposed to John doing songs and Billy doing songs.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they didn't compose together anymore. I mean, they can say, well, we didn't live, you know, Paul lives in the city and we live out in the country type of thing, but that was never an issue before, you know, so that
Mhm.
happened. That was an after the fact when they started doing their own thing.
Yeah. So that's how we came up with the book is, you know, you have to look at it. We were looking at it as going to court, defending him, and this is the reasons why we think he was taken out. Those are some of the reasons. And then we go into, well, who could have been the one, you know? And the only source that can cover up a murder like this would be government, right? Because if JFK, our president, being assassinated in '63, total cover up, and we know now who was behind that. You know, the government is the only,
Alphabets.
yeah, the big C. You know, the government is the only ones that would be capable of suppressing this.
Yeah.
And having
also-
control over the media to suppress
Also-
it. So yeah, so you know, those are the things that we looked at, and then we go into how the rumor started. It did not start here in the United States in '69.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Billy likes to say you guys started it in '69, you know, in '69, we didn't start it.
No, it came over here in the spring of '67 through the British bands that were coming over to New York City and getting their start in New York City. And they're the ones that was talking about it in the art community in New York City, and then it just kept spreading. And then the British bands would go to Detroit, Michigan, and hook up with Russ Gibb because he was, of course, the DJ that was involved in '69 and breaking it on the air.
And he knew what he was
But-
breaking.
Yeah, he must have known because he was talking to the British bands. His partner was the manager of the Who, so he knew the Who.
Yeah.
So you have all these connections. So obviously he would have known about that rumor. So that's how it started. The rumor started in Detroit. And then, of course, the British bands then went out to LA to get their record label once they became popular enough or whatever. But that's how it jumped. The rumor we know started in September of '66, because that's what's in Tony Barrow's book, John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Me.
Yeah.
So we start from that, mid '66. That's when he got the phone calls from the press that alerted him that Paul was in a car accident, and they wanted to know if he was alive or dead. So he called Paul, and Paul said that, no, I'm fine, I'm at home. So
Billy?
What?
You go for that.
What, Susan?
Was that Paul or was that Billy who's when he
That
said
that was Paul in September, and we believe that he had a fender bender at that
Right.
time,
yeah.
which sparked those calls, right?
Yeah, I believe that was the first attempt on him.
Right. They missed.
The first serious attempt on him.
So first time don't succeed, try again, basically.
Yeah. Which, if you think about it, we don't see Paul a lot in the end of September into October. And if he realized that that was not just a fender bender himself, that, that was purposeful, then he's sort of playing on the down low a little bit.
Because he sensed, right, that he was being followed quite a bit.
And there's been talk that he knew that he was checking his car for being tampered and stuff.
Yeah, because I think that didn't they say that he would always check, make sure under the hood or something like that, or check his brakes and things like that.
Yeah. Well, you can check them so often, but then when you least expect it is when you get it, right?
But also, you don't always know what to check for. You could check and
Exactly.
Right.
I was just going to say, when you said it must have been the alphabet agencies, they were the only ones who had access also to the British government. So
right. Well, and the alphabets apply to them. They just have a number and add it into their letters.
Yeah.
But as far as Kennedy, when she said that it was Kennedy, but yeah, those two agencies worked hand in hand from across the pond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that goes to what I was saying about the relaying of what I heard Paul tell me here a couple weeks back. And what we actually wrote in The Shadow of a Bassman. And you want to go into that? How we laid that out? Because,
But what bit?
When we actually have him passing in November, the car and what happened.
Oh, no, you can tell your story. It's fine.
No, I already did. That's what I mean. But you want to relate? I told what he was relayed to me, which was what we had in The Shadow of a Bassman, with the blowing of something into Paul's face and getting into the car. Go ahead. Go ahead. You tell it. After I laid it out for you.
Well, we know, according to the rumor, Paul left the studio angry and got into his car on a rainy night and drove off. But we know that the Beatles were not in the studio at that time. So you take that out of the equation. Paul wasn't in the studio, so where else could he been?
And Paul
Brian Epstein would be the...
Ann, hold on. You can't see.
Sorry to butt in, Anne. I was just going to say Paul wouldn't have got in his car and driven off. That's just not his character. He wouldn't have done that.
Right. Plus, he only lived 4 blocks from the studio.
Yeah, so he was walked.
So.
Right. He walked to work.
He.
Which is Amazing. Yeah, so he liked to walk to work. So we know he wasn't in the studio, so it just comes to, what would he been doing while he was making the soundtrack to The Family Way at the time. So he could have been at the studio, but not with the other three.
Right.
So he could have met with, Brian Epstein and had a tiff with him and left, but then you're kind of stuck with, he would have been in the city. And this had to happen, somewhere outside of the city in the country. Mm-hmm. So we also know from Angie McCartney's book, The Long and Winding Road, that Paul went home every weekend. And they lived out in the country, on the countryside. So, so we put Paul there at his father's house. That he gets a call from Brian, and Brian wants to see him in Port Marion, where Brian actually had a beach house. So I'm like, okay, this works. So he goes, so we have him in the book, going to the beach house and then getting into a tiff with a fight with Brian. Brian telling him, step in line, do what we say. We have an agenda for you. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so he drives off and he's followed. And then the accident happens and he's murdered.
We have in the book. Go ahead.
So that means Brian would have played a big part in his death. Yeah.
Brian's a big reason.
Yeah.
Brian, we have in the book that at the time we have the Uncle Albert character there with Brian. Now, whether or not he was there, I mean, that's the fiction part. But we had him blowing was blowing smoke in his face. If somebody was blowing scopolamine or something else and putting that in you while you're driving, you're going to go erratic. See what I'm saying? So whether there's problems with the car and then there's problems with you at the same time.
Yeah.
That was what was coming through. But I just thought that was strange because that's the same thing that we had with him having smoke blowing in his face. Anyway, just my thought. That we didn't know what we were at the time. We didn't know at the time we wrote that. Yeah. Because that was 3 years ago. 4 years ago. Whatever.
I mean, we had quite a few of those where we write it and then, months, a year later, we find, oh, that's actually true.
Yeah, that's true too. How'd that happen? And I'm sure that more and more revelations like that will come out, So Brian's house up in Port Marion is also up where they, and Susan, you might know this, they filmed The Prisoner.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the show? I didn't know about that show, but Ann turned me on to that, and I watched some of those episodes, and that was very interesting.
With the big bull.
Yeah.
John Hallbeck showed me that, actually. That's credited to him.
Yeah.
He showed me that, and then I passed it on, and I'm like, oh, brilliant. Okay.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Plug it in.
Plug it in.
That sort of alludes to the possibility that when celebrities step off the celebrity wheel, they go somewhere and to be on stage anymore. They're not allowed to.
They're not allowed to leave. That's when all the crazy stuff starts happening to them. You look at some of these people now. They're just shells of themselves being puppeted. Brittany.
That's what we've been talking about lately too. That they're just shells. They're just people pretending to be themselves, somebody else.
Yeah, you
well,
don't
there's
hear
that.
many,
There's that too.
You don't hear of many celebrities retiring, do you? They don't really retire. They either keep going until they're 70 odd, or they die in a car accident say suicide or something like.
Right.
There's not a retirement list of many celebrities.
Yeah, or they're taken out, their contract's up, and somebody else is put in their place, actually, pretending to be them.
Or they're taken out.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
not even replaced.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
I mean, that just, yeah. Did we talk about Bob Saget on the show, on the podcast, Amelia?
We were going to, because how all of a sudden you just hit your head supposedly and then not wake up.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
there's a whole his contract was up.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Yeah, his contract was up. And I think that's with a lot of, and there's also, if you notice, a 27 club too, that a lot of celebrities have died at the age of 27.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of them were around the time of the Beatles.
Exactly. A lot of them.
Yeah. Jimi Hendrix.
In that era.
Yeah.
Janis Joplin.
Joplin.
Mama Cass.
Mama Cass.
Do we know what 27 means? What's the symbol?
Their age. The age of when they passed away.
They all passed.
Is there a symbol to 27? Like, why 27?
That's something.
I'm not quite sure on the 27. The 2 and 7, 9 is 9. 9 is coming up for completion. I don't know. It's the completion.
Yeah.
I
And
think it's going to do numerology.
Yeah, that's what I mean. 2 and 7 is 9, and then the 9
and 9 has to do, I think, with some kind of an evil number, from what I understand. It's usually people thought it was 13, but it's actually 9.
Yeah.
From what I gather.
Yeah. I don't know. I have to go back into some of I have written down some of the different things for numerology, but they all have, numbers have different meanings depending on where you're using them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to know, because sadly, the 9 has been my favorite lucky number, and I was like number 9 when I was chosen for cheerleader, and I was in the 5th grade.
Well, and then we have revolution number 9, number 9.
And then, as they were only choosing 6th graders at the time.
Yeah.
And I happened to be the 5th grader, so
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Nope, it does not.
So the number 9 for revolution, that's the other thing, is all the backmasking. They didn't set out to just say, oh, look, we're going to spoof these people, and have this just be a joke. That's purposeful. They had, was Jeff Hemrick was actually was he one, Ann, that was saying about what you have to do that, you have to purposely put it and overlay it into the tracks.
I don't think it was
him.
Jeff Emmerich. I heard that quote from Buckley Bailey show that he did in '69.
Yeah, in the trial.
He had a sound engineer testify that backmasking can only be done in the studio at the time of the recording.
Yeah. I thought it was Jeff Emmerich that was the one that said that. I'll have to look. That's in the book. We have to look back. The whole transcript's in there, huh?
There's so many people, but I remember reading that as part of a transcript from that Lee Bailey trial that he did on Paul McCartney in '69. So yeah.
And that's another thing that's been destroyed. Another piece of evidence is that F. Lee Bailey episode, trial, where he had him and several people that were questioned, including Peter Asher.
Oh yeah.
Who defended the replacement?
He defended them both.
Yeah. Because he said, if it was a hoax, he would back the hoax.
Yeah. He knew them. He made a sliding remark too about knowing them both.
Yep. Yeah, knew them both. those little things you look at and say,
These little things are like, pebbles that are in a pile that are just mounting to become a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Did he say that publicly? That he knew them being Paul McCartney?
The who what?
When you said he knew them both, was he
Yes,
talking-
it was part of the special that was done with F. Lee Bailey being an attorney here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And he did like a mock trial to determine if Paul was dead in 1969. And he had people like the sound engineer and Peter Asher and others that were testifying. And Peter Asher was the one that had said that, he asked him if he knew Paul McCartney then and now, and he said, yes, I know them both.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
It's in the book as the transcript actually occurred, not my recollection.
I also wanted to just mention that the as far as Billy being Paul is concerned, had Paul lived, I think we would have seen a really beautiful, intellectual, amazing older man. And Billy never developed that character. So Billy's, he was still doing like the 22-year-old mannerisms and stuff that you just wouldn't do as you get older.
He had to continue on the trying to pretend he was still Paul, and Paul was still 24, so he carried on those attributes.
Yeah, for years though. Like, who does that?
Someone that's not the person that they're supposed to be.
Right.
Someone who's very bright as well, like like the mouth thing and the it's everything it's so trite. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then now to continue to be the Paul until the day, of course, that he dies, and we all know that's not going to be, the real Paul that dies.
Yeah.
Because he's already gone. Do they know exactly where the real Paul's buried?
No.
He wouldn't be buried, would he? Would he be buried?
Or cremated, I guess I would say.
No, I mean, but there wasn't a whole body, was there, at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, we don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the head was separate.
Well, we don't know that either. I mean, that's just that's John's interpretation of somebody's interpretation of that picture. And then he blew his mind out in a storm type of a thing, or he lost his head or hair.
I think that decapitation started with Fred Laborde.
Yeah.
He was a journalist. He was a student. Who wrote an article back in 1969 basing the story of how Paul died off the clues, and he came up with this idea that Paul was beheaded, and it's kind of has stayed that way for decades. I don't really think he was beheaded.
No, I don't either.
I think he was shot in the head, and it was a massive head wound, obviously.
Which has been dramatized in pictures and stuff. Even Billy himself has, as we all may have seen some recent pictures on another group talking about showing the pictures of him drawing himself or whatever with the massive head. He shows those himself those self-portraits over the years where he's really drawing Paul.
Yeah.
His, the death scene. And John did a few of those too.
Yes, he did. Yeah, and it's not a decapitation. It's the top of his head is gone, and he had brain matter. And that picture that John drew, John didn't draw violent, pictures, drawings. He drew cartoons and, you know,
Dogs.
him and Yoko together and, you know, that kind of stuff. This was really a graphic picture that he drew of a man with a sheepdog having broken legs, broken arms, and a massive head wound with brain matter coming out. And that's just not John's style at all. But he did draw it.
Yeah.
For a fan, and this guy had it for several decades. And then I guess he sold it, and that's how it became public knowledge that it was a drawing he did privately for this fan, and it was now on the auction block. I would never have let go of that.
Right. Well,
but,
look at people don't know what they have and they sell it, and you know.
Yeah.
But he also
You can, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Anne. I was just going to say it's also a way of getting it out. Like John would have wanted to get it out. He did do that in small ways. Yeah.
True. That is very true. And then, you know, don't forget the Wizard Magical Mystery Tour. Paul, you know, the character, cartoon character of Paul as a wizard.
Yeah.
And he's got that brain injury going.
There's a lot of clues in Magical Mystery Tour. I need to watch that movie again.
That was a terrible movie.
It was a terrible movie, but you got to watch it again for all these nuances.
You know what really stuck out for me was they were in Wales and they went into a fish and chip shop and nobody recognized them.
Well, who would recognize? Well, first, Billy doesn't look like Paul, so how would you recognize Tim in that ugly sweater? Paul, who dressed so, you know, snazzy.
Yeah. And also, without Paul, there was no cohesion. They didn't have that. They didn't have that magic anymore, did they? So I just thought, wow, how could you have the Beatles go into a fish and chip shop, even if it was in Wales? Like, I know Wales is like behind the mountains, but they would have known who the Beatles were, and you know, it just wouldn't have happened if it was.
Well, and how much of it was staged, you know?
Yeah.
They didn't just walk into a shop without people knowing they were doing a film. You know?
I don't know about that. I sort of felt like.
You thought they just actually walked in off the street?
Well, that scene felt really uncomfortable to me.
I think the whole movie was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, I have it on my computer, so I have to watch that again.
Mm.
And then the fact that girl asked him, you know, how old he was, and he said he was 30, which would have been 5 years older than Paul.
Yeah. Which makes him what, 87, 88 now?
No, well, 80, 85, going to be 86.
Okay.
5 years ahead.
He looks like he's got dementia, don't you think?
Well,
He looks
can't
very
keep track
lost.
of anything, so I don't know. I mean, he's had memory. I mean, he says he has memory issues as far as remembering things.
I thought the video he did with Ringo, with Ed Sullivan, was very telling, because Ringo was like so lucid and in control, and Bill was just like in the background and looked to me like he didn't.
Yeah, he was just sort of there, like, I'm not saying anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ringo took charge of that one. That was good.
But that was like the real memory of going back into a space with fond memories, and you know, compared to standing there and not having a clue.
Having a clue because you weren't there.
Yeah.
He did the same thing on Letterman when he first was in the studio there, and he says, well, you're here back at the studio, and he didn't know where they were, where they stood. He said, well, the audience was over there or somewhere. And
yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of things people just don't make the cohesiveness and put it all together.
Right.
So hopefully this book puts things together and puts it in perspective as to the different things that were going on and the different possibilities, and then all the clues. Right. So now the end back of the book, we get into a lot of the clues, the songs. Why would they have done all this? I mean, why? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
The walrus was Paul. Yeah. Why?
St. Paul. Why would they do St. Paul?
St. Paul. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I just posted a song up the other day. Oh geez, now what was the name of it? Congratulations, whoever you are. Which was the joke that Linda's collaborator on the book. Gosh, now, and what was his name? Jan? Was that Jan?
Peter, wasn't it?
Huh?
No, Roby Young was the DJ from New York City that broke it.
Who was the guy she was with that sent her the telegram? I'm trying to. Jay Marks sent them the telegram when they got married. Like, congratulations, whoever you are, because nobody knows who Billy is. And there's a song now, and I posted it on my Facebook page the other day. So if you want to see it, it's down there. And the words and everything, it was just like, it just fit everything. So whoever did that, kudos, because that was another one of those, like St. Paul. And everybody doesn't know about that one. It's St. Paul by Terry Knight.
It's a great record, actually, isn't it?
It's sad.
On it. And yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, there's several of those tributes out there. What was the other one, Ann? Jose Feliciano.
Oh, Jose, yeah. What was that one?
I can't remember, and I just was looking at that aspect. I can't remember. It wasn't St. Paul, but it had something to do with Paul. I mean, there's one out there. If I find it, I'll link it in the description. Maybe.
Well, there's a couple, like the Ballad of Paul is out there, I think. And there's another one that was out there, but those were done for Paul is Dead radio shows too.
Yeah.
Where St. Paul wasn't. That was just a song that Terry Knight wrote and put out there. I don't think Jose, I think that was a commercial. I don't think he did that for a radio show, if I remember right. But the other couple of songs that are out there that are attributed to PID, they were originally done for radio shows.
So they were purposeful.
They were purposeful, yeah, because, you know, everybody wanted to know what happened to him and wanted to know the truth. And so here in the United States, there were a lot of local radio shows dedicated an hour or so to figure out if the rumor was true or not. So they hired bands to come up with a song, and so they did. And I think there's like 2 or 3 songs out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to let people know that St. Paul is legitimate. I mean, he wrote that song on a flight from London back to the United States after he met at Apple and met the replacement who paid him.
Right.
That's a strange thing. He paid him, gave him money for what? Who knows? Then they came back and wrote the song.
Yeah.
And it's the only song that's not a Lennon McCartney
song
that is in their catalog.
It's in the McLennan catalog. Yeah, McLennan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah, why would you have a song attributed to Paul in your catalog? It's not a George song. Something didn't get in that catalog, you know, but this song did.
Yeah, because Apple sued.
Yeah.
Terry Knight and sued his record label, Storybook, and won the case. And got the rights to that song, and it became part of their catalog, the Lennon and McCartney catalog.
The Michael Jackson bought.
Which I understand the replacement has now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he
has
did
it now.
get his hands on it again, did he?
Yes, he
God.
did. When it went back up from Sony, he bought out of it. Spent a little fortune of it, but
I think that
he can
cost
afford it.
Jackson. I think it cost Michael Jackson a lot, that,
Yeah.
in terms of, you know.
Well, that
what
might have put the target on his back too, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
you
knew.
look at that. You look at Michael Jackson's career from the time that he bought the Beatle catalog. It was a steady decline.
Yeah. It
And
was
he was
after.
in financial ruin by the time he was, I think he was murdered.
Yeah. I do
I
too.
think the doctor murdered him. Propofol is only given during surgery. What are you doing giving it to
Somebody
a
that
person
has sleep
in their
issues.
private home?
Yeah.
It drops your respirations and it can kill you fast.
And then you leave them unattended.
And then, right. It's not a drug you give. That's, and the anesthesiologist has to administer that,
We could go through the litany of how many people were taken out. Prince is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
River Phoenix is another one. How many we talk about when we're going through these wars, we're going through the years and we're saying, well, that wasn't real. I mean, that wasn't natural or purposeful on their part. No accidental suicides here.
Yeah. Michael,
Whitney.
sorry, I'm just saying, going back to Michael knew, didn't he? He knew that wasn't Paul. And I think it was an act of
Michael was the same age as you and I.
Yeah.
So whether or not he knew is hard to say, but he would have been in the industry if they're talking. I'm sure he would have maybe heard that as others people, for his own self at that age, because we would have been in our 20s at that point.
Yeah, but remember that Michael was part of a family with older brothers, so
Yeah,
he might
yeah.
have something,
Well, I would think it would be more the industry. He would have heard it through other musicians,
Yeah.
maybe not even his own brothers, but from others. Yeah, it's possible. Those are the things you can't know, but you can surmise.
Susan, have you ever looked at the Beatle cartoons?
Not recently, but are you talking about Yellow Submarine?
The show, the TV show that had the cartoons, that was a weekly. It was a weekly here in the States. That we watched on Saturday mornings. It was so great. We would get up as little kids, at being at 9, 8, 9, 10.
Make our cereal, get in front of the TV.
Yeah. It was cartoons, and they would do 2 songs and have a
song.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
So they're in the second book. Pictures of that is in the second book. I don't remember if did we put any of those pictures in the first? Yes, we put it in the nonfiction too.
Yeah,
Because
that'd be in both of them.
There's clues in that book, in the cartoons. Go ahead, Ann. You're gonna say that, so go tell them what the.
Well, when I bought the DVD set and I binge watched those, and I was very surprised what I saw. I saw 5 episodes that indicated that something was going to happen to Paul. And this is
predictive.
going into.
It's like The Simpsons predictive programming.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it came out in 66, 67. Those cartoons.
Yeah.
They aired in 65, 66, and they ended in 67. So they started, before Paul's death and ended shortly thereafter Paul's death. Makes you say, that's.
Yeah.
Odd timing, isn't it? But the very
were the
first
purpose.
episode is called A Hard Day's Night. And the Beatles are going through a cemetery. And if you look, there is a tombstone that says Mac on it. RSVP. Well, RSVP is, reply Mac. Mac is short for McCartney,
Mecca.
or Mecca, his nickname. And there is a tombstone right there.
And then there's a tombstone next to it as well that says something on it as well. I can't remember now. It was part of the RSVP.
Mm-hmm. So that was one of them. Another cartoon was called Any Face, where a Paul replacement
A double.
is in the band. Paul has a double, and it's up to the other three Beatles to figure out which one is the real Paul.
Wow. Was this an American production or an English
It
production?
was an English production aired in America.
Wow.
It was an American company.
Was it aired in the UK? Well,
It was an American company that partnered with a company in London to do the cartoons.
They did all the
And then they had American voice actors to do the voices of John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want,
It was guttural.
they didn't want too much British accent because they felt that, Americans wouldn't be able to understand them.
so
And
it was
the Beatles were like, this is how we talk.
Yeah, you'll have to, there might be some on YouTube.
But
If you can't find some, maybe I'll look for some later. There's out there a few of them, but
so it wouldn't have aired in the UK. That would have been too weird. They wouldn't have
no, it
liked
did not air in the UK.
Right.
yeah.
No, it was only an American thing. And
But Paul would go to where they were doing the illustrations and look at what they were doing because he had to know these things.
Yeah.
He would look at what they're doing. So he would see those. That's the subliminal in your mind. You're seeing the images of he's being shoved in a drawer. He's being shot at with the one with the crazy doctor and needles coming and different things. Like you said, the two people, they're doubles. The car chase that looks like one of the Krays.
yeah, they had the mob
The
chasing Paul in a car.
Wow.
And one of the guys, the mob, the main one, looked like Ron Craig.
Yeah.
Over here, we wouldn't know who Ron Craig
Craig.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he gets chased in the car. He gets into a car accident. His car goes off into a lake. And of course, he survives. You're not going to put a death in a cartoon, a child cartoon, obviously.
Right.
Especially at that time. But
If an anvil can't fall off of the side of the mountain and hit a coyote or a roadrunner, they're not going to kill somebody, driving into the lake water. But
Unfortunately,
with him.
yeah.
I'm sorry to cut this short a little bit, but my mom keeps trying to call me. It's her birthday today.
Oh, go ahead, honey. We're done soon here anyway.
Okay, well, I love you, ladies. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you.
I love y'all both. Thank y'all so much. I love y'all.
Love you too. We'll talk soon.
Nice to meet you, Amelia.
Okay, talk soon. Bye. Nice to meet you.
See you.
You.
Yeah, so that was really ironic, and we actually, because we feel that the Krays were a contracted, whatever, so it was there's the Krays chasing Ron Cray chasing Paul through the streets into whatever his watery death that wasn't a death because it's a cartoon. Yeah,
Right.
well, Paul's seeing that.
He just resembles, Ron Craig.
Well, and Paul would have known who Ron Cray was.
Yeah, Ron was the mad
likely.
one.
Huh?
He was the insane one, Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you want to call both of them, both of them were insane. But
Have you seen the it was a film, I think, called Legend. Have you seen that, about the craze?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. I thought it was very good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just heard something too of an accounting of how they were raised and their mother and the different aspects, but that was their path.
Yeah.
Um,
They're very good artists.
well,
When they
yeah,
were in prison, they did art.
Oh.
They did paintings. Yeah. Some of them are really kind of nice.
hmm.
Hmm.
I haven't seen anything that
Mhm.
anything that pertains to their actions, or was it just all kumbaya?
It's pretty much landscapes.
Yeah.
But, it was up for auction not too many years ago.
Mhm.
They were
Well, then
selling their
It might still be out there.
their artwork.
Interesting.
Mhm. So, yeah, we put the cartoons in both books, Shadowbox and Shadow Dancing, because it was just the timing that it was before, Paul's passing.
I think if they were threatening him, as we've thought that, he had a couple warnings, so to speak, that was an indirect way of saying, look what can happen to you.
Yeah.
You get the message.
Not that indirect. Quite.
Not that indirect, but I mean,
Oh.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, and also in the
Otherwise, what's the
cartoon-
purpose?
Mm.
Why wouldn't they have done that to John or to George or to the others? It was always Paul that was getting the thing. Same thing when we were saying it's predictive programming in The Simpsons. There was a Simpsons episode where Paul McCartney's headstone is next to Elvis in one of those episodes.
Oh.
The very first Halloween special.
Yeah. Now,
What
there
is the
again, why would you
Treehouse
put,
of Horrors?
if you have Elvis's, why wouldn't you put Buddy Holly or James
Yeah.
Dean or somebody else, but you put Paul McCartney?
And it's the very first Halloween
Yeah.
special that they did, and they put Paul's tombstone in there.
Yeah, if Paul didn't die, there is a lot of references to the possibility that he did.
If he didn't die, what the heck? What?
Yeah.
Why? What was the purpose? And it, for him, the replacement to sit there and say, well, this is just nonsense or whatever. They perpetuate it over and over repeatedly. It's like they bring it upon themselves. Doesn't make any sense. So therefore,
One of the things that irks me is when he dies, they will give him a state funeral, the same as they did for Jimmy Savile. And
but then I hope that's the things that happened, like for Jimmy Savile after his passing, starts humbling out.
yeah.
But yes, that'll be a sad day.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's the only thing I keep thinking is it's gonna be like Jimmy Savile. That's just whatever pops into my head all the time. That
Yeah.
the avalanche.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I think to keep the trance, they have to be alive. Like Jimmy Savile had everybody entranced. He was a very powerful magician, and then when he's gone, everything started to unravel. So I wonder if it will be like that. That like the whatever it is that keeps that going goes when they go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Yeah, and if there was NDAs, do those NDAs only exist for the lifetime of the person? You know, when are they able to start talking?
They should be illegal, shouldn't they? NDAs.
They should be, really, shouldn't they? Exactly.
Make
An awful lot of secrets.
Much easier research if they didn't have NDAs all over the place.
Yeah, it'd be much easier to get people to tell the truth instead of skirting around the issues. I know that's all they do is skirt, but all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yep, that's craziness.
You do look very much like Cynthia, I have to say.
I don't think so, but that's good. It's just the hair and the hat.
Yeah.
I think she has a hat. She had a hat just almost like
this.
this.
Did have a hat like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is see, it's got it's gray and black and white.
Yeah, it's a dog tooth hat or hound tooth, you would call it.
Yeah.
And it's a butcher boy, isn't it? They call it a butcher boy cap.
I don't know.
It's my favorite style of cap, actually. I've got a few like that.
Yeah, I have another one that's black, and I always called the black one more of a John Lennon cap because it had more of, well, this one has the pullover, whereas John's had the brim around here.
Yeah.
He had a nice white one. There's one on Amazon that's like that. It's like a white leather cap.
Mm.
So
did he have that
nice to wear in the summer?
Did he have that one on when he and Yoko made Imagine? Did he have that?
No, I've actually saw it one with Cynthia had this one on, and he had on another one. It was white.
Mm.
I'm not sure what year it was, and it could have been in the 68.
Mm.
It was, plane embarking, going on travels or something somewhere.
The hat that John wore in Help, he designed himself. And he bought 5 of them.
Were they still together in 68?
They were for going to India. So, yes. Right? Was that 68 when they went to India?
Wasn't it 67?
Well,
they met him in 67.
Brian died in August of 67 when they had first met the Maharishi.
Yeah.
So was it in spring of 68 when they went to India?
India, yeah. And it was shortly after that. I mean, he was already seeing Yoko, but they were still together, but not together. You know what I mean?
Do you two know anything about Elmer Cogan? Have you looked into Elmer Cogan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. He passed from cancer.
Yeah.
In October of 66.
Yeah, she was one of those many deaths at the end of 66. And John was having an affair with her, I think.
Oh, yep. Yes.
And so that was like another nail in the coffin of John.
Yes. I sort of remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I always wondered if the reason that John distanced himself from Cynthia and Julian was because everyone around him that he loved seemed to die. Yeah. And I just wondered if that might have been.
It could have been because that's how his thought process was. They all leave him one way or another.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, ladies, we're a little over 2 hours, so we went long.
Oh.
Yeah. We went long, but there's some good tidbits in amongst all the the carry on of us being friends and just chatting.
Thanks for
So
inviting
hopefully
me.
everybody got something good out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun meeting new people and having them on our show and joining us on the journey together.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you, Susan, for coming on, and hope to have you on again in the future.
Yes. Susan, we've had some great chats when we didn't have any cameras like going. We've had some good talks. So I know you know a lot about this whole SOP topic. You know, you're very knowledgeable on it. So we're appreciative of you joining us today.
Well, thank
you. And Amelia.
And Amelia.
Yeah.
Amelia's new to the thing, but she's been immersing herself.
Oh, I think when you're new, that's the best time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's
you're questioning everything and looking at everything and being open to it. People need, if somebody hasn't, and if you've lasted for 2 hours with us and you're still not understanding what's going on, do some research.
Yeah.
Read our nonfiction book when it comes out.
Well, yeah, we hope that the nonfiction will help people to understand Shadow the Baseman, the fiction book, better too.
Yep. So anybody that wants to know where our books are, it's shadowofabaseman.com. Links are below when we get this uploaded. So yeah.
And this is for entertainment
purposes only. We have the disclaimer in our introduction music that this is our opinions, and the opinions of our guests does not necessarily make it the opinions of the majority of people in the world. God help them.
Yeah. For entertainment only.
For entertainment only. All right. So we'll sign off.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.